Welcome, thank you. We appreciate you joining us. I'm Eric Tornwall with NetApp. I'm a business development manager in our service provider group. And we thought we'd get together this afternoon and get together kind of a diverse group, actually. For information exchange, actually, was kind of the intent of the message. So we've got a mix of folks, actually. We've got some folks that are users of our product. We've got a group of our service providers. We've got a group, actually, some folks from NetApp, and also some of our channel partners. So we welcome all of you. I appreciate you giving us just a few extra minutes. As far as I understand, it was raining, and we all know how nice the Colby gets when it's raining, so we wanted to accommodate some of our guests who were coming, and it took a few extra minutes to get here. So thank you for that as well. So my colleague, Evan Miller, actually is going to be leading the discussion. Both of us, somewhat relative newcomers to NetApp. Evan actually got there a bit before I did. I'm coming up on my second year in NetApp. I guess Evan's in his third. Both of us part of an organization within NetApp that's in its fifth year of existence, actually. An organization actually that's dedicated to service providers and cloud. The concept there was actually to work slightly differently with our customers than what was done in the past with how you might interact with an enterprise organization, for example. The whole idea was that together we would work with clients to build solutions to put in market that would leverage the best part of our solution, the best part of our products, but that would essentially offer the market certain unique attributes and certain unique business value. So that's really what the conversation is about today, is to inform you as to what the culmination of some of those efforts have been. In some cases, some of those efforts have taken and spanned the better part of that 5-year period. Some of those efforts have taken the better part of several weeks or months. It just really depends. But in each case, the panelists that we're going to hear from today are going to share with you how they're leveraging the better part of our product, whether it is cluster data on tap or whether it's some of our features like FlexCone or whatever that may be. And I think what you'll find actually is that in your environment, you may be leveraging some of those things next. I think that the fundamental fact is that the business of IT has shifted, especially since 2008 or 9 time. We've seen customers demand maximizing their investment in IT, minimizing investments from a CapEx perspective, getting the most out of their dollar. And they're looking for solutions that are able to leverage a combination of things, whether it be consuming as a service, consuming as an internal service, consuming as an external service, or the best combination of both. And that's really what our intent is here, is to inform you of what's in the market today. And most importantly, how you can leverage what you're doing today with your value-added partners that you have as part of your ecosystem and who you're actually leveraging today as part of your business. Right? So the main concepts there, right? NetApp is the #1 storage operating system in the world. Right? We have some great attributes as a company, but the people who actually enable us to do that are our partners. Right? We don't have a NetApp cloud solution. Our cloud products are enabled by our channel and by our service providers. So it's key to us to make sure that we provide exchanges like this of information, and that's why we encourage you to make it interactive, so that you can share the best parts of the use of our product. I'm going to turn it over to Evan Miller, 25-year veteran of IT, who's a colleague that we exchange information and work together on a daily basis, and hopefully this is good and valuable information. So thank you. Thank you again for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for the applause. That's good.
Well, that was for you, Evan. It wasn't
All right, so today we have on our panel discussion, I'll start over here, Kent Landry. He is a cloud evangelist at Windstream. I like that title. I expect it probably
Born by the water.
Right. Brian Hierholzer, who is president of Artisan Infrastructure, and Victor Shevchuk, storage architect at SoftLayer, which was acquired by IBM. And so today we'll start right now, and we'll run about 30 minutes or so into the panel discussion. Then I want to make sure you have time to give them your toughest questions about where they're going. We're going to have a list of questions that we won't get through. That's all right, because we're going to ask some questions, and we're going to see where it's going to go. This is going to be somewhat spontaneous today, because we're trying to, obviously you can't be too formal in a beer pub, so that's why we have it here. And you know how clever that is, you know, data on tap. I think that's great.
Speaking of which, can I get one?
Well,
You get water.
I thought we'd open it up with some shots to see how low they can should be additional pressure.
Yeah, wrong answer, you gotta do a shot.
So answer the question before the shot, and then
We have the video running to do it before and after the comparison. Yeah. All right, so we want to keep it light and fun, but also really be serious about the business that you're all trying to achieve, right? Okay, so let's start off with our icebreaker question. So we all remember the crash, right? 2008, 2009, the turmoil, the long, slow recovery that's happened since then. So guys, what impacts do you think those events in the last few years have had on companies and IT organizations? And how have those events created a new normal, right? So that was the first question. Oh, I forgot to give you guys the introductions, okay? Forgive me, we're going to come to that question in a minute. Each of you guys, would you give a 1-minute introduction to yourself, the company, what you guys do, right? We'll start again, alphabetical order. All right.
Thanks, Evan. My name is Kent Landry. I reside in Austin, Texas. As Evan introduced me, my title is Cloud Evangelist. It's a fairly new role inside the organization. Windstream has recently acquired about 27 enterprise class data centers. And part of that effort is to be as much of a technology evangelist for the technology to implement and integrate these capabilities, as well as a business evangelist for those adopting this new method of IT learning. My background comes by way of a company called LexisNexis, through IBM, through Dell, and the channel with my own company.
I'm Brian Hierholzer. I'm just learned that I'm a close neighbor in Austin, Texas. I'm with Artisan Infrastructure. As far as we know, Artisan Infrastructure is the industry's only wholesale-only infrastructure as a service provider. We sell exclusively to managed service providers, VARs, telcos, systems integrators, etc., that are looking to build a product or a cloud solution to then deliver to an end user. That's pretty much.
Not direct to customer.
We are wholesale only. We don't have a retail strategy, nor do we recognize retail. We don't know who the retail customer is.
Victor Shevchuk with SoftLayer, now an IBM company. SoftLayer, we are an infrastructure as a service provider. We have 13 data centers globally where we manage over 100,000 devices across Asia, the US, and Europe. And we have quite a presence all over the globe. Our secret sauce really is our automation. We can provide you with compute and storage services very quickly via either our portal or directly through our API. If you need things in mass, we can work with you that way. And we can many times stand up the server for you within 40 minutes. So.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the introductions. Sorry I skipped that initially. So back to the question. So we had the crash, and there's a new normal. Who wants to respond?
Well, I'll start.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I spend a lot of my time traveling and speaking in these forums. I'll kind of give you an acid test of what I've felt here in the last 90 days, coming from coast to coast. That reflects on kind of some of the inflection points that happened back then. So, most of the people I talk to have really had to redesign their businesses in two things. So, you're either born in the cloud and understand the dynamics of OpEx and the infrastructure that it's taken, or you are more of a traditional business that wasn't born in the cloud. And therefore, the migration from one to the other has been a challenge from stakeholders who have P&L responsibility for a line of business and integrating that into the IT organization. Other than some of the dynamics that the CIOs are faced with in dealing with this migration is understanding how to monetize the value that they're trying to bring to market is extended through these services, whether it be cloud, whether it be infrastructure as a service, software as a service, and reflecting that within the value chain that the organization creates. Sometimes it's in a user model, sometimes it's through a channel delivery model, sometimes it's through the OEM production model, hardware and software. And so the integration of that value chain has been very difficult. And what we've seen is these companies and these organizations are looking for the integration points, the touch points by which they can become nimble and agile and adjust the fact that they don't have the capital budgets, the lending power, or the risk-prone decision-making that was prevalent prior to that.
All right, Victor?
Go ahead. Okay.
Is there more difficult?
Yeah, the way I look at it, and you hinted at it a little bit quite a bit, is budgeting. At the end of the day, being able to look at a budget and know that business may be being reduced and trying to cover some of those investments or trying to expand your business in a limited capital environment and dealing with a tight budget. The software as a service world, I think, has really helped stimulate me, or has been really stimulated by the tight budgets, et cetera, where it allows for services or software, et cetera, and capacity infrastructure in an on-demand model. So it helped, in our opinion, because of limited budgets and the challenges with lending, et cetera, the ability to grab resources in IT or software services that reside on infrastructure in an on-demand model is really, I think, going to help address or is addressing those challenges. We have a unique perspective in that we sell through service providers, so the ability for them, the service providers, to create a set of services dealing with the ramifications of the 2008, 2009, 2010 budget crisis, and be able to allow for services in an on-demand fashion, I think is really kind of where the cloud is starting to really pull through the value proposition, because now it's allowing that end client or that business user to consume in an on-demand and flexible or elastic model rather than something so fixed and under contract per se.
Good. You guys are already answering the next question, which was, how are you going to help organizations to survive and thrive, right? Because we're all under enormous pressure. IT is a pressure cooker of performance and cost and regulatory and all the other demands, right? So any other thoughts to add in terms of how you're helping IT organizations to serve the business?
It's very similar. I mean, people are limited on CapEx and raised floor and big pipes and redundancy. All those things are very expensive to stand up, especially if you're starting out. And so why not leverage someone else to take the brunt of that?
All right. Good. Thank you, gentlemen. All right. So many IT organizations are struggling with this business imperative to shift from a custodian of IT assets, if you will, the hardware, the software, people, all that stuff, to becoming a broker of business-enabled services, because the business is asking more and more for IT to come to the table and add direct value to business outcomes, or at least that's what we're seeing. How can you help them make that transition, right, to be more of a broker of services, not so much being the single provider, right? Because consumerization, cloud, cost pressures, there's lots of things causing organizations to shift that model. So, any thoughts about how you specifically would like to help businesses become that broker and be that internal provider? Other than what you said?
Well, so part of the strategies that I preach and teach reflect from an assessment base that I apologize for my hacking up here. But what that means is, the lifecycle management of assess, design, implement, and optimize, and we all understand the process. It is a very impactful one, but yet brings us back to the rigors of what we call performance classification. And it's very relevant in terms of how IT is enabling the stakeholders in the line of business to fundamentally change and make that shift occur more quickly. agility, right? You speak to it whether or not we enable it through infrastructure as a service, whether we have the ability to now virtualize our software model and make useless an old Gartner term, I don't know if you all remember, called software asset management. Okay. Does everybody remember Swami? Well, I was part of that founding core back in the days of LexisNexis, right? Because we probably had one of the biggest data centers on the East Coast on a 9.6 dial-up private net. So we understood that. Taking you back, so I age well. The point about all that is software asset management these days is mitigated. Right? Look at what Microsoft is doing with Office 365. Right? Look at the context of that and what they're doing in that paradigm. It's a pretty big shift. So as I see this enablement, how do we assess this model? And I know Evan, you believe in the same theory as well, that you got to have a strategy, you got to have a plan, you got to understand the push-pull points relative to that capability. And utilizing technology is a facilitator of that strategy. It's not the foundation of the strategy. The strategy is what? In my simple terms, is to sell something to turn a profit. And I speak that very clearly because if in fact the strategy is oriented around following the money, and it's oriented around I want to invest technology for the sake of that, we can all probably have references of write-offs or balance sheet impact, right? And negatively done in terms of, oh, what happened to, remember Sun and Apollo? Does anybody remember Apollo? Does anybody remember Object? Okay, Cadre, remember those days? Where are they? But they're the genesis of this foundation. So I would tell you that cloud computing and the virtualization of the context by which we see this today, most of the CIOs I speak to are looking at that as their next tool, right? A little controversial, but that's the way I view points.
Controversy's good.
To me, cloud enablement and its impact with regard to the business and how it consumes IT as a resource is kind of shifting from something that you had to purchase equipment and these assets in your premise or home in order to, it was a means to an end. Most businesses have an application or a service and that they are trying to build value in. And the equipment that necessarily those software assets or those services reside on, where the only option was to put that on the premise because you needed those to necessitate or fulfill the desire of building value in some sort of business or some sort of arena. Today, though, with ubiquitous bandwidth, if you will, and the emergence of cloud, you have all those resources that are available to you in an on-demand fashion, but there's still components of security, potential ownership, trust, of the value of trust. Where does my data reside? How secure is it? How am I going to get access to this information? And oh, by the way, are these applications or whatever I'm consuming going to be performing properly? So there's a lot of components that come into that. So it's this transition to cloud and the services that we're just talking about today and how we enable that are really the value proposition going through and how these items will be consumed. And going back to budget and all those other things in the next question.
All right. Nice segue to that next question, which is, all right, tell us about your menu, right? At a high level, not all the way down to the cost of CPU, but at a high level, what's your menu, right? So we get a feel for how you guys differ in your service offerings, how you approach the market, what solutions you provide. So you guys want to go through the menu, like 2 minutes each? What do you do? Let's let Victor start.
Sure. Please go to SoftLayer.com and look at our menu. It's right there of all the compute services we offer, either dedicated or virtualized services, cloud, however you want to consume infrastructure services. We have them there to provide.
Cool. Short and
So,
sweet.
yeah, so we're in a unique position in the market because we're an enabler of the VARs to provide services to the end client. So we kind of look at it from a different perspective, if you will. So the end user, that consumer of services in the cloud, they need agility, again, they need security, et cetera. So our menu is allowing the VAR to choose from a set of services to build solutions for the end client that can consume in that sort of fashion. So we work more with the service provider and helping them craft a solution or a product suite in order to deliver what that end client may be looking at on your website. Can we ask questions?
You sure?
I'm just real curious about your model without giving away your secret sauce. So you're slicing that margin at least by 2x. And I'm just curious how, because SoftLayer is going to the end user, you're going to the VAR. How'd you guys get us so cheap? So that
Well,
everybody gets to make some money.
If you think of us,
Pointed it out.
think of us like Sam's Club, for lack of a better, if you will. We are a volume dealer. We work with telcos and other service providers, so their ability to aggregate demand and land it on infrastructure we own allows us to buy more. Our business model also from the beginning was set at a certain price point or a certain margin level in order to scale, in order to operate. The other thing is extremely narrow focus. We are good and we are good at one thing. We are good at enabling service providers to build services and solutions on top of that. We don't try to kid ourselves and feel like we have any resources to allow us to build desktop as a service, because our service provider customers build those things. They have that competency and they have the scale and the systems for that. So it's more of a focus and kind of an extremely narrow niche scenario that allows us to function and grow and thrive. Does that answer your question?
And you mentioned, to your knowledge, you don't have competition with like Microsoft Azure being.
Well, for us, we're more of working with a Windstream, per se, as a potential customer, right, or another service provider. Our customers are actually competing with Azure than we are competing with Azure, if you will. Just because we live lower in the street, they're selling service. Exactly. So our customers may come out and leverage us to build a public cloud solution competing with Azure.
That's a good segue. Obviously, the baseline for us is the baseline, right? Tier 3 class, SSA 16, SOC 1 Tech 2 certification, and we build up from there, right? Infrastructure as a service is the platform that we grow off of. But where we go to market is in the wholesale, right? Traditionally, Windstream, you may or may not know us, is a telco. They're an ILEC and a CLEC in these markets. It's a roll-up of about 8 companies. So we go to market very much in the retail space. We do have a big channel program. Our channel partners are very interested in adopting this type of business model because as we partner with organizations like Brian's company to extend that capability of our stack. And our stack starts at the data center. Obviously, we can transition from Colo. Colo is a big one, but you go from that stack up into managed hosting. And then that extends itself into a managed firewall. We have load balancing capabilities. We have DBAs. We offer SQL, MySQL, and Oracle DBA services support. Obviously, the OS level, Windows x86, Linux, you name it. We are a VMware shop. I will say that, so we don't necessarily support other third-party platforms right now, like or Azure or the Citrix Zen, but we have. Right? We have very big, large private cloud type environments. We host a lot of SaaS platforms for customers, and we do go to market horizontally, meaning from a channel partner perspective, for those of you that are channel partners, can build on this foundation, take a disaster recovery as a service, which we do sell. We partner with NetApp and use their Snapware capabilities very effectively in our 9 cloud pods. And it's a very unique service offering. Not everybody can do it, right? Because in order to do that, you have to have a certain level of skill set to be able to provision and manage that. And it's more of a business process arrangement rather than a technology process. But it is enabled through the technologies that we buy from there. I think the other value that these organizations bring, similar to why I think IBM's acquisition of SoftLayer, is you look at the extended reach. So everybody now is looking to move away from an EC2 model and say, I need to understand data security. I need to understand where my data resides. I need to understand the data at rest versus data in motion discussion, which we had earlier today. And how do we address that?
Who owns the data?
And who owns the data? And what's the SLA for those who are in test dev is one model, but when you're in a production role and you're looking at carrier grade 5 nines uptime, who are you trusting with? I know Neiman Marcus is here and they have an e-commerce store. If it's down, one of our big clients. If it's down, what happens? The BIA impact of that's got to be
Almighty hell. There's a couple CIO pieces floating around, so.
So lots of differentiation you can see here. We're trying to give you three very different views of the market, right?
Yeah, and I'll just throw in that where we kind of differentiate from that is we're not looking to outsource your IT department. We're there to provide, we are an infrastructure provider. We're there to provide compute and storage resources, not administrative resources. So we're not looking to replace your existing or your DE18.
Yep. So more direct to the end consumer, right? Wholesale, and more custom specific business process.
You can call a cloud provider the traditional ITO type of model, certainly in that IT outsourcing. And then it extends itself because we are a network provider in the UCAS space, Unified Communications, which is also now talk to a telco provider, we're going to call that cloud. They call a lot of things cloud. That's the cloud. Hosted, virtualized Avaya, my telco, that's the cloud. That's what I say.
So, yeah, if you took every one of you and asked the question, what is cloud, we'd get different answers.
Mark did that.
Sometimes I think of better terms.
Our marketing department.
Fog is a better term.
Thank you.
I put my infrastructure to the fog. All right, so we're here because there's NetApp on that poster there, so let's make that linkage. So why NetApp? Why did you guys choose NetApp for your infrastructure? What does that mean?
Well, for us, it means that right now we pretty much strictly use NetApp to back our cloud offerings. So if you come to get virtualized cloud services from us, the storage that resides on is NetApp. And the reason we chose NetApp was because of the scale-out capabilities right now with cluster mode. In different markets, we have different adoption rates for cloud. Some markets, that adoption rate is very quick, and others, it trickles in a little slower. Last year, we opened up 2 data centers, one in Singapore and one in Amsterdam. And one of the markets took off, and one of the markets didn't. So we don't really want to spend the expense of putting in a monolithic piece of storage where we might only see 10% utilization and might never realize the full utilization of that product. So we'd rather have that ability to start off small and scale up and out as we need it.
On the fog piece, I'm gonna try to demystify. That's really bad. So, again, because we have a very unique model and we sell to service providers, and then their clientele, especially when you come to the cloud and you've got trust and who owns the data, where's my data, who controls the data, how do I get access to my data. One of the key components for us, it was an obvious choice several years ago when we started, we were looking at every storage vendor in the space. And because we have to enable hundreds of service providers, how do we take a storage system that underpins these service providers and allows us to partition and isolate and be able to hand control over to a service provider? And for us, the obvious choice was NetApp, without a doubt. It was a product called Multi-Store that I don't know how utilized it has been, but for us, it was the absolute definitive factor for us to be able to hand control. Not to get too into the weeds here, but with 8.2 cluster mode, to be able to allow for command line level interface for us to be able to hand to a service provider, or to be able for that service provider to hand to that client that some engineer wants CLI or native Snap manager tools. Those things are huge factors for us in being able to hand that control over, and that security, and that peace of mind, and that trust that comes with this whole cloud. These are huge things for us. Now, especially with 8.2 cluster mode, when you have quality of service and being able to isolate workloads and guarantee I/O and performance and thresholds within a shared system, these are just further validation when we chose the right partner.
Okay.
The only differentiator for us is because we're an organization built on multiple acquisitions, in 2 layers of thought. One was the vision. Where are we going in the future? NetApp helped us clarify that. What our strategy was, doing an assessment about who we want to be and how we want to maintain that focus for our retail use as well as our channel partners. Two, we had a mess, right? So you can imagine our first cloud pod was a Sun instance, and we needed to simplify, orchestrate, and demystify our own cloud storage environments, right? Thank you. And Evan, I think you were there in part of that decision criteria with our it's a challenge. It was a challenge. It still is a challenge, but we have overcome that. We've been able to that technology and been able to come to market with a disaster recovery as a service option that has really taken off for us. And it's already facilitated through those decisions of 3-4 years ago tactically implementing NetApp, and now where we see the vision 3 years after.
So the storage industry is rapidly moving towards virtualization, just like the server layer, just like the network layer. How has being able to virtualize storage been able to be a benefit both to your customers and to your own business?
Back on that point, storage virtualization added simplification layer that we didn't have. I mean, we must have had roughly 27 data centers, 24 NOCs, all of which had a different level of expertise within those operations. That was costing us a fortune, let's face it. And in order to scale our business and to grow, point-to-point type solutions, the virtualization layer, which obviously we're very comfortable with from a telephony perspective and a data and voice, is a natural extension of what we were doing with our cloud platform model.
So imagine being in our position, and I have 400 service providers that want to get into the cloud or start building a service for their end clients. And they have a limited budget because this is a different paradigm for them, and they're trying to understand how they can get into this business in a limited fashion without a lot of risk. Being able to handle back to multi-store, being able to hand a service provider an instance of a filer or a slice of a filer at potentially starting at $250 a month versus a transaction of potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. For them to get the control as if it's their own and be able to grow a service based on that has been critical. And again, we could, when we were looking at the storage vendors in the space, some competitors out there, and we were looking at single systems and single administrative systems on a global basis without the tenancy. Most people consider tenancy in a single fashion, departmental or company, the end client. When we look at tenancy as significantly different, from a different viewpoint, and that's from the service provider and then the end client. So, thank God for cluster mode 8.2 and multi-store, because this is the storage platform that enabled our entire business model to exist.
For us, a lot of it is very similar. Another big piece for us is because we are so centric on our orchestration engine. That's the heart of our business, and how we are able to provision so quickly. Plus, having an API and something we can easily hook into to send those commands out to the array and quickly provision.
One of the big shifts that's happening that I'm seeing is the discussion in the past about storage has always been capacity centric. Do you have enough? Can you scale capacity enough? Right? But now the discussion is moving to, do you have the range of performance levels, right? Because on one hand, you've got really cold storage for 7-year retention, and on the other extreme, you've got all SSD flash for really crazy workloads, right? So, are you guys lining up to that kind of a range of service and performance with price to match, and allowing customers to non-disruptively move between those kinds of service levels? Is that in your vision?
It's in our vision, the non-disruptive moving part. I mean, that's something that's more down the line, but we definitely will. You can have object storage, iSCSI block storage, file storage, or your own dedicated storage device if you like. So we offer a full menu of different storage options for you as far as the seamless mobility between those. Not yet, but sure, it's something that we see coming down the line.
I think one of the things that's been unique about this is I travel and understand these business requirements, be able to offer high performance in-memory compute. You know, you could articulate that as cost per gig or whatever that might be at the time, and we're certainly looking to monetize that. And NetApp is bringing us the capability, especially with CI2, and that IOP QoS value is something that we are testing today. Flex products are certainly engineered for that, up to the solid state structure. And that's something that as we speak to, we can monetize that to the end user through our channel, market direct, based on price performance. And you see that. I'll give you a good example. A competitor, picking on retail today, but a competitor of ours in the southeast who runs a very similar organization like Marcus, they're busy in Q4. Right? And so their issues with us are we need compute storage capacity, and they always project it maybe at 140%. And they miss it by like 2x. And if we were to be that constraint on our end, right? So it's one of these diamond customers. And so with this ability to migrate some of their loads into this space, we say, listen, the instances that you're on with us today are huge. Here's how we want to tier this for you. Here's what we can do in Q4. Here's what we can do for you if you want. Because the cost structure to maintain it at that level in Q4 isn't relevant to them in Q1. And we can add that value, and that's a differentiator. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to dollars and cents. I hate to say that to follow the money, but all the validation that we've had in deploying this technology is how do I become smarter and more accurate at what I do. And if you want to build resilience in, you can take it from the telco guys that lower, capacitize everything. If you've got that kind of free cash flow, invest it somewhere else. Because the lifecycle management of technology is not the place to invest. If you think it is, right, I've got something to say after this, right? But it is not. Right? It's not an application of risk. It is not a returning answer.
I'll just add that, several things you mentioned, multi-protocol, right? Elasticity, etc. Isolation, dynamic workloads from high volume accounting systems, maybe at a certain tax year, etc. Right? Basically, it's coming down to scale out. How can you manage a single platform that gives you the access and the NFS, the SIFs, gives you the flash, gives you the SATA, gives you the SSD, gives you the caching, and then also be able to turn the dial, dynamically allocate workloads and spin them up quicker and spin them down. And for me, again, back to NetApp, the ability, especially with 8.2 customer, the ability to scale out horizontal scale systems and to move across these things dynamically with capacity on demand is just a critical factor for me. For us, it's a no-brainer.
Cool. All right, so before we go to Q&A, one more question to help set the stage. So what have you guys identified as the best strategies that companies all the way from SMB to enterprise can adopt to help begin taking more steps towards cloud-hosted, off-prem, on-prem, all the different sourcing models you can use, right? How do you figure that out? What do you learn?
You never stop with it, right? I mean, it's, so we'll stratify the market a little bit. For the SMB, the entry point's a little below. It's a cash credit model for them. Order to cash is very relevant in the SMB market. Right? And it allows us to provide them a world-class capability on a hamburger budget. And I don't mean that negatively, and I apologize if that offends everybody. But the other side of that point is, from an enterprise class level, we deliver the enterprise class capability through our technology partnerships. We can scale out all the way down to the SMB level and have the same user experience. So at the end of the day, how you consume those services at the same QoS, quality of service delivered to that end user, whether you're an SMB, small, medium, business, 250 employees or less, 5,000 or 5,000 plus. And we stratify it. And I think it's very relevant that to get started, if you were born in the cloud, I talked about that earlier, you're used to what we call an MRR, monthly recurring revenue. And companies, like Artisan here, who sell and can sell on a capacity or usage-based model and don't require those same CapEx, fit that load very well. They understand how to pay commissions, they understand how to motivate Salesforce, and they understand what that means for as they go up the stack, capability for larger enterprises. They may not be as concerned about the MRR, but there is still an incentive-based model that needs to be paid from the traditional IT bar that's used to paying out at the time the PO was booked versus recovering it over 36 months. That's a very real dynamic.
So for me, the cloud, to your question, maybe the smaller, more agile, or less asset, or the entity with less assets and less at stake and less legacy investment, it's easier to get started in the cloud because you need something. You go to a vendor like Windstream or SoftLayer, you spin it up, you turn it on, and next thing you know, you have a hosted service. Right? For those that have legacy assets and control, security concerns, etc., maybe it starts a little bit differently. Maybe it starts with data protection. Right? Okay, I've got this legacy investment. I'm sitting here. I have a trust factor. I've got regulatory compliance issues that I need to deal with. Maybe the first dipping of the toe is to move the data protection side and replicate that into the cloud as a DR component to a DR as a service with Windstream. I don't know if SoftLayer has that. So it's kind of made more of a dipping the toe factor or a staged approach or a phased approach. Start at DR or even just a backup version as one starting point. Maybe from the backup version, you start with a true DR as a service, so not just a repository in the cloud, but a DR. And then as you get comfortable with that with Windstream or a SoftLayer or another provider, then you can move from, okay, we've got DR, we've tested it, we've validated it. Now let's move to maybe some production workloads, and then even maybe we replicate back from the cloud to our premise, so we know that we've got this information here and it's secure. So maybe actually reverse the cloud, in theory, right? From a conceptual idea. Not many people talk about that, but that's actually something that we encourage our service providers to do. If folks are hesitant from a security standpoint, maybe you run workloads production in the cloud, best of breed data center, 2-in designs, tier 4, all of these scale-out systems, and then from the security peace of mind standpoint, you replicate them to the reverse DR strategy. Maybe different.
Good thoughts. Any ideas?
Careful.
Careful.
It's especially if you come from enterprise mindsets, it's a different way of thinking and how you think of redundancy and how you put your applications out there to be redundant, especially like if you're looking at like an Amazon or something, if you're looking at east-west or different data centers, how do you look at a company and their data centers and how do you put your application out there for resilience. It's just a different way of thinking. And think about your claims too. That backup out there is great, but if you got to restore and now it's going to take you 2 days to get your data back, those are things you need to think about.
Design carefully.
Design carefully.
Okay. Good advice. All right. So, do you believe these guys? What challenges, right, do you think that you've got that they just can't handle? What are your toughest challenges for them?
So can I get an idea of who's all sitting here? Is there a lot of bars? Are there a lot of people looking to piggyback the solutions? Are we customers? Just out of curiosity.
All right, so who's in the channel? Right, got a few, right? Who's an enterprise versus SMB? Who's enterprise? All right, good, there's 3. Who's SMB? 2 others. 1 back there, okay? Does that kind of give you guys?
Yeah, it does. You know, obviously, you can frame your questions differently depending on the mindset that Kathy wears.
Yes.
As an enterprise customer, you know, we have all the suited infrastructure. We own it all, right? We're very much capital rich, expensive work. So, right, the number one challenge we contend with daily, hourly, minutely, you know, we are a very large private cloud. We're fully virtualized, been like that for years, 85+% virtualized enterprise-wide. So trying to make that leap to the cloud, we call it, I mean, it's very simple for us. You have to have a leap platform, right, to jump off and say, I'm going to look at infrastructure as a service or software as a service. But the reality of it is, in our type of business, we have a lot of legacy applications that we care and maintain, you know, care and feeding, that you just can't pluck up and say, let me move you to the cloud, ta-da. right? And it works. Back to your planning carefully, right? That's the number one struggle we deal with. We look at leak platforms all the time. If it's a new function, we're doing fraudnet, we're doing fraudulent type of stuff, and we can figure out how to move data, efficiently across the WAN back to our inherent mainframes and other systems we have in-house that can do it. But I'm just curious how many other customers, enterprise-wise, struggle with the embracing, right? There's a lot of visions, go cloud, right? We are cloud. We've been privatized cloud for a very, very long time, and we're good at what we do. We understand the benefits of public cloud, but we do deal with compliance issues, right? If you're not PCI compliant, we don't talk to you, right? So if your data centers can't show off that they have all their full certifications, I'm just kind of curious about the other enterprise customers that contend with that lead platform methodology. We buy a lot of shrink-wrapped applications, and so if they're shrink-wrapped, they're already built, they're already customized, and they just plug right into our systems. If you code in-house, you can blow up systems real quick out in the cloud and collapse them, and that's where the cloud is phenomenal, right? So that's the thing we struggle with, is finding that in where's a good platform to try to, embrace it.
I promise you, we didn't plant him. This is unsolicited.
Well, I'll bridge across that, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to come into. So many things you talk about the touch on, I see more cloud stuff, doing small business, startup, those kind of things. I see them being successful, and a lot of things that I see from an enterprise side, they'll go in and they'll say, I want to take this, it's on an old piece of crap hardware, it's very important to me, so I'm going to take it to the cloud. Okay, now I got to back it up. Oh, I got to stream that back to me. Well, that costs too much. That was, they get caught in these ruts of taking, well, this is how IT operates, like you talked about earlier. I want to move that to the cloud. The mindset of it, the way you operate is different. And you talk about so many different things about that. And so trying to see where you start off with the traditional thinking, the way IT was to where it is now, moving from the traditional IT, the enterprise side, moving into the cloud, seems to be just very disparate between each other. Private cloud seems to be the way to go. And so just trying to get a lot of the aspects like that about where enterprise side goes in that direction.
Yeah, I kind of support your viewpoint there. We're exactly the same situation.
I don't know an enterprise that's not in that situation.
Yeah.
Lead platform's a good keyword. You can use it as your buzzword, and those work.
Can you use that? That's nice.
Yeah, lead platforms are easy. Those are the easy ones. But when I've got legacy multi-platforms, I'm Solaris, AIX, Windows.
You've got a hybrid environment, right, basically. But I mean, the biggest challenge is figuring out which application, because what we've seen happen is start up with a dev test, dump it into cloud, right? Low cost stuff. But as the results are coming in, actually the results are coming very positive, there's a drive to reduce costs. So then it becomes a question, what other application can we put in? That's when it gets a little bit hazy when you have enterprise applications and say, well, which of those could potentially, then you got all the PCI compliance issues, all the other things that come into play. Not an easy move. It's a quick move initially, and then it kind of slows down. And that's kind of what we're seeing.
You nailed it. SMB, I think it's an easy play or easier play. I won't say it's easy, but the planning aspect of it is just it's a whopper that we contend with daily.
Well, no doubt. We're a fairly young company, and for us, for the longest time, our CEO said our biggest competitor was the little IT closet and SMB operation, right? And for us, a lot of times our best customers were these companies that do games or things like that with, they need elasticity. All of a sudden, some guy puts out an iPhone game, and now all of a sudden he starts with 2 servers, and within a month he's at 35 servers. And so that elasticity is great for somebody like that. But that's where they're starting. That's where that born in the cloud sort of thing kind of comes from. And I understand your challenge. When I was at Storage Networking World last year, I attended all the cloud tracks, and it was very interesting to see all the departments that are jumping ship and going directly out around their IT department, and they couldn't do it for us, so now we went around them and are doing our own thing, and boy, that just seemed to create a nice ball of mess on its own, right? So, it's a challenge for you guys for sure. The old with the new is much more a challenge. That established legacy, that does definitely create a challenge. careful and adoption in those small layers where you can. Start with dev tests, start with those packaged applications that aren't custom to your environment.
With regard to your point and your point as well, gentlemen, the reason why we named the company Artisan is because at the end of the day, we consider ourselves a custom builder for every brand. You can't scale doing everything. You have to have a narrow set of expertise. But to your point, you have legacy applications, you have new applications. You're one department may be looking at some PaaS environment. You guys are doing some new widget or some new application for a mobile device, and then you've got something on mainframe. You need a service provider or a VAR that's going to come in there and really understand your needs and try to help you with those assessments of what these applications are. And then the way we would work with that VAR or that service provider is to help understand your needs, what they're trying to design, what you're trying to design, and build a custom application or a custom environment or a private environment for that. And maybe you have a hybrid of you have an easy public type consumption model for certain applications, and then there are very specific things from a regulatory standpoint, etc. But then maybe even platform as a service. So we work with platform as a service frameworks, and through a VAR can build a platform as a service component onto it and hand you a test dev platform as a service for the newborn in the cloud app, as well as also assess some of these legacy applications and how they're going to work in the cloud environment, and working through them and working with us, being able to test and do proof of concepts and validation and analysis of how this things work over time and how they'll function. So it's really just getting a deeper relationship with your integrator or your service provider, and then taking the time to get an understanding of your business. And then having a partner behind the scenes also, maybe with us, to be able to do that.
Also, it has, I stress the importance of the professional services side of the assessment, and, I'm born out of that culture. I think you gotta have a roadmap, you gotta have a strategy. Hybrid cloud models, we talk a lot about it. It's private storage, public compute. It's that simple. If you got a private network today, if you look at an enterprise type circuit, if you want to get a WAN that's on private, you can be PCI DSS compliant across that WAN. You can talk about storage as a service, you can talk about replication. There's a lot of capabilities. You can just drop a node right into that rack and experience this capability without boiling the ocean. Right? Because we go to boil the ocean as an enterprise customer, and we see it all the time. It's got a grand plan. And nobody in here is from Citigroup, right? So, I'll pick on City because I know City very well.
There were supposed to be two. Yeah.
I probably would go, but, pick a big bank like that under a data center consolidation project, that's cool. And it is literally boil the ocean. And there's not too many enterprises that, where do I start, where do I stop? What's the definition of a project, right? It's got to have that. Where is that in an enterprise? So, I suggest there's channel partners out there that have experience in this, that live this every day, smaller platforms. What about the hybrid compute models that make sense? And we have the elasticity and the bandwidth to support it.
Now, quick commercial from NetApp. And our partners, if you've got a requirement to sort through your IT sourcing strategy, and you need somebody to become a third objective party to come take a look at what you're wrestling with, certainly ask us to do an initial discussion with you to see if there's a way that we can help you sort through that. NetApp IT has gone through this journey of sorting through our own applications and what should be in the cloud, what could be in the cloud, what needs to stay in-house, right? So everybody needs to do that. If you haven't done that or want some help to do that, certainly we've got capabilities and partners to do that. Any other questions? Yeah.
Stipulating the fact that you guys would never ever make a customer mad, you'd never have a customer decide that they wanted to leave your services, because you're always going to do what you have to do to make sure they're happy and thrilled and excited. Wow. We're going to stipulate that fact, At some point down the road, any decision that anybody makes is the wrong decision, right? Eventually, it's going to be the wrong decision when it comes to a lot of this stuff. So, what I see a lot of customers run into is that sort of exit strategy thought process, but it's kind of too late at that point. So what do you guys do? How do you address that with your customers? What kinds of things do you think about when you're trying to figure out the end game when, you know, when the contract's up, or, you know, you talked a minute ago about, you know, who owns the data, right? I mean, how do you deal with those kinds of issues?
We have. We've been through there. So one of it is lesson learned. If you haven't lived it, and you don't have the experience to show for it, then you probably are going to be an exploratory path, right? And it's not as easy as you think. Then the contract comes up, I don't have a vendor lock-in profile, I want to take everything I got in your data centers, multiple data centers, and I want it back. Give it back to me. Okay, how do you want it as a customer? Right? Specify your return policy, on what format, and on what condition, and how do I deliver it to you. So, and I don't mean to pose a question with a question, but there's a lot of that venue for customers who think they want to leave. And generally, if there's an SLA breach and if we haven't satisfied with the credit, or we haven't smoothed it enough from our sales force, they're leaving. Right? And the last thing they do is leave scorched earth model. We can return all their data. The unique values, I think, of everybody up here is we can tell you where your data is at all times, how it's secured. It's not parsed out through the global economy of storage. It's not. It's on this NAV rate. Oh, what? Send us your NAV and load it up. Send it back to you. One of the big things we've done in that case is actually done that transition, what we would call, you know, almost like a failback on the DR side, is how do we fail back to that site? And it might be from Windstream data center into a SoftLayer data center. And so the beauty of that is, somebody talked about pipes, you have a big enough pipe. If we can facilitate it with the onboarding of the new vendor, and the onboarding of the new vendor has those capabilities to onboard more cloud environment, it should be fairly seamless. If it's on a NetApp infrastructure, it should be very seamless. Right? But if you're going to a VM shop or a Hyper-V shop, you're going to have a different. Absolutely.
From a wholesale side, we see it a little differently because we can't control what the service provider does from a win standpoint or blowing up a customer standpoint, et cetera. So, you know, so we have customers winning customers and losing customers all the time. So for us, shipping data in and out of our pipes, et cetera, for those service providers is a common everyday thing for us. So, you know, we don't have that retail relationship with that. So sort of so it's a common for us.
All right, we have a public network, so feel free to suck your data back down.
Well, second to the point, all that, you gotta have a place to put, right? I mean, that's one thing that the customers kind of don't think about sometimes. They gotta have a place for that stuff to land, either in the interim or, you know.
Are you involved?
No, I'm bad.
Well, let me give you a gotcha on that. So when you deprovision VMs in those instances, do you actually think that decoupling actually purges or overrides those data stores? Oh, really? Whoever thinks that? Let me tell you, that's not the truth. Right? If you have a data wipe mandate, the answer is yes. If you don't, that storage rate becomes available for the next summer. It's a big deal. Right? And to your point, if it's decommissioned, I want my data back, doesn't mean you guarantee you can wipe the drive. Ask the question. Ask the question. So wipe the drive.
So back to service catalog.
And then how do you verify that?
Oh, there's verification tools, absolutely. You know, there's a lot, Blanca, I can go on and on, there's a lot of tools.
Contractual stuff.
Plus, thank you, plus, you can come sue us.
Plus, from a menu or a services standpoint, you know, to have options for data compliance components. And for us as a service provider, we deal every day with other service providers that are having to dedicate disk environments specific to the client because of you can still live within a scale-out system within NetApp, which is wonderful, and isolate a disk group or a RAID set or an aggregate specific to a client. And isolate that specifically for them, so when that data wipe comes, you know that it was, even in a multi-tenant shared infrastructure, back to wonderful components.
All right, they earn their food and their shots?
I want to see the Jaeger shot before we break.
Yeah, and just make sure it's diet That's it.
She's raised her hand over there back there. You have shots?
How many?
Shots?
How many do you need?
You're a double.
2 more rounds and then we're gonna go. All right, guys, here's the second set of questions.
She's serious, I think she is.
I'm serious too, Doc.
Speaking appearance?
Taking the hedge out.
7.
Yeah,
So-
well, you're gonna pose a question
For
for
the,
them.
for the channel partners in here,
All right.
tell me what you consider as a good channel partner relationship. Let me get, is it profitability, is it relationship, is it responsiveness, whatever. So that's what you're a channel partner.
Well, that's,
Change the question. I
Yeah.
just want to hear somebody's.
It's a combination of those
somebody's
things, but obviously profitability and margins is one, but having a communication set up between the various components of whoever the provider is, or the OEM or whoever. I mean, it's very frustrating to have an issue you can't resolve through the person that is your typical sales person, the person you work on or whatever. So when I have a problem with who I talk to, and there's not an established escalation in education, so you don't know what to do. And if it's a customer issue, and they've escalated to you, now you don't know what to do to get something resolved. So communication is key, profitability obviously, but just a real partnership. I mean, it can't be one way.
All right, I think the smell of food is making us restless, huh? So we probably need to wrap up.